Back when America was young and the buffalo roamed, Davy Crockett got voted out of Congress. Not being a sore loser, he stood up in front of his constituents and said, "You may all go to hell, and I shall go to Texas." So he packed up his belongings, and just as he was about to leave, the three little pigs came running up, shouting, "Davy, Davy, Davy! We hear you're going to Texas. Please, please, Davy, please take us with you. You see, Farmer John came and took our mama away, and they were headed out west in a big truck to the place of no return. Nobody ever comes back from the place of no return. Please, Davy, please take us with you. We're lost and all alone without mama." Davy looked at the boys sadly and said, "I never heard of the place of no return. Where do you suppose that is?" The boys looked at each other and shrugged. The oldest and smartest of the little pigs, his name was Zeke, said, "I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure a river runs through it." The twins, Zeb and Zed, nodded and went back to playing their instruments, which were a flute and a fiddle. Zeb played the flute, Zed played the fiddle, and Zeke played no instrument at all. He was the serious one, always worried about the future. "Montana?" said Davy. But then he laughed and said, "Hop in, we'll go find your mama." And so they hopped into the back of his 57 Nomad station wagon, and off they went, singing songs like "On the Road Again" and "Rolling Stone from Texas," including the nearly impossible yodeling sections. That section. The miles flew by, and so did the tumbleweeds. They stayed in Best Westerns along the way, where the owners allow pets and serve you free breakfast, but not bacon for the three little pigs. When they arrived in San Antonio de Bejar, they could see that a river did indeed run through it. They drove around town posting flyers that said, "Have you seen my mama?" on them, with a picture of mama that the twins Zeb and Zed drew using crayons. All they could do now was wait. Davy felt bad for the boys, but he had some business back in town, and it didn't involve them. "Listen up, boys. I got some business that it's not going to take me more than a minute, so why don't I drop you off here, and we can meet up later?" That sounded like a good idea. So he let him out of the Nomad, and the three little pigs waved goodbye and ran off, each going his own separate way. Davy shook his head, thinking, God help him. But there was nothing he could do about it now. The boys regrouped when they realized they had no idea where they were. And then they followed a yellow brick road, which would have led to Rome because, all roads lead to Rome. It would have done that had they been in Italy, but since they weren't, it led to the Alamo instead. They went around back to the manger thinking they could stay there. But there was only room for Mary, Jesus, and the three wise men, not three little pigs from Tennessee. The twins began to cry, "I want Mama." Zeke said, "Mama would want each of us to build ourselves a house. Let's do that." The twins looked at each other and then they laughed. And then they ran off to gather building materials. "This'll only take a minute," said Zeb, "and then I can go back to playing my flute." He built himself a house as Zed rocked Turkey in the Straw on his fiddle. "I'm going to build mine out of sticks," said Zed, and that's what he did. Zeke groaned and shuffled off to silently build himself a brick house not too far from where the twins had built theirs. The sky was growing dark and no sign of Davy. "I thought he was only going to be gone for a minute." "Yeah, where'd he go?" The twins were tired and hungry from all their playing, so they yelled, "Good night," to Zeke, and went to their respective homes for some rest and whatever they could scrounge up to eat on a little piggy's budget. Just then, what looked like the grandma version of Santa Anna, but was really just a big bad wolf dressed up like Santa Anna's grandma, slinked up to Zeb's straw house and knocked on the front door. "Let me in, let me in, let me in," said the wolf, his high-pitched voice not sounding anything like Santa Anna's grandma. He was counting on the three little pigs not being from around here to get away with his trick. Zeb peeked through the keyhole. Something didn't seem right. Nobody's grandma looks like that. "Let me in," repeated the wolf. "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin," Zeb shouted. "Oh, yeah," said the wolf, ripping off his grandma costume. "Yeah," Zeb replied. "Well, then, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your straw house down." And the big bad wolf took a big deep breath and he blew poor Zeb's straw house down. "Yikes," said Zeb, and before the big bad wolf could snatch him up and eat him, he ran down the lane to Zed's stick house and started pounding on the door. "Zed, let me in," he cried. And since they were twins and Zed knew his voice, Zed let him in and slammed the door shut. Zeb told him what happened, and Zeb said, "Don't worry, he won't be back." "How do you know?" "Because wolves hate the sound of flutes." And so the twins picked up their instruments and started playing, "Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf, the big bad wolf. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Yes, sir, no, sirree," with their amps cranked loud enough for the neighbors to complain. But since they didn't have any neighbors, there was nobody to complain. Just then, a knock at the door, which the twins only heard because they reached the end of the song and hadn't started up a new one yet. "Knock, knock," said the big bad wolf. "Who's there?" said Zeb and Zed, but they already knew. "It's Grandma," said the wolf. "Let me in, let me in." The boys looked at each other and screamed, "Not by the hairs on our chinny chin chins." They hugged each other tight, scared half to death of what was bound to come next. The big bad wolf tore off his big bad grandma costume and yelled, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your stick house down." The big bad wolf took a big deep breath and then he huffed and he puffed and he blew Zed's stick house down. "Ah!" screamed the boys, and they ran as fast as they could away from the big bad wolf before he could scoop them up and eat them. They ran and they ran and they ran and they ran without looking back until they reached Zeke's house and banged on the door. He could tell by their voices that it was really them, so he quickly let them in and deadbolted the door behind them. Zeb punched Zed, who said, "Ow! Why'd you hit me for?" "You said wolves hate the sound of flutes." "Yeah, well, did you ever consider that maybe this wolf's the exception that proves the rule?" Zeke cut in. "Do you guys even know what that means?" Twins looked at each other and shook their heads. Zeke was about to explain when the doorbell rang. "Ding dong! Grandma calling!" "Go away!" the three little pigs cried in unison. "Let me in! Let me in!" "Not by the hairs on our chinny chin chins." "Please!" "No!" "Well, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your brick house down," said the big bad wolf. He could decide which role to play. Then the big bad wolf took a big deep breath and he huffed and he puffed, but he could not, I repeat, he could not blow the brick house down. Zeke said, "Shh." He wanted to hear what that wily wolf was doing now. Sure enough, the big bad wolf was up to no good, only now he was no gooding from up on the roof. "Quick, let's put the soup on." Zeke lit the pile of hickory in the hearth and the twins ran uselessly around as Zeke added vegetable stock to the biggest cauldron he could find. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf, the big bad wolf. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Yes, sir, no, sirree. Ha! Soon, the vegetable stock was boiling, which is exactly what you want for soup. The boys could hear the big bad wolf pacing on the roof. You could tell he wasn't used to it because he kept slipping off and landing with a thud on the ground. Each time he'd get back up, shake himself off, mutter an obscenity, and climb back onto the roof. Now he tiptoed to the chimney and flung himself through, not realizing till it was much too late that he was in the soup. I'm melting! He cried as if he were a character in a children's horror movie. The boys took a moment to say a quick prayer for the soul of the big bad wolf. Then they sat down for a delicious wolf stew dinner. Davy showed up shortly afterwards, and there was enough to eat for him and for all the rest of the Tennesseans who were also visiting San Antonio de Bejar at the time. I'd like to say that this pigtale ends happily and that the three little pigs find their mama. But that's not how real life works. You see, there are twists and turns in every tale. And in this one, the twist and turn is that Santa Anna shows up with his army of 1,600 soldiers. 1,600! Now, some say it was as low as 1,400 and as high as 1,600, but 1,600 sounds more dramatic. Well, anyway, he showed up. He shows up with his army of 16. He shows up with his army of between 1,400 and 1,600 soldiers, leveling everything in their wake. He didn't need to huff and puff to blow Zeke's beautiful brick house down, just a battering ram and a handful of flashbang grenades. When the walls tumbled all around them, the boys ran and they ran and they ran and they ran, and who's to say if they made it or not? Nobody else did, so why should they? What we do know is this: you should always hire expert contractors, and you should always remember the Alamo.